Welcome back to the Day After Roswell Part 2. My name is Klaus and I'll be your host and narrator for this video. We ended Part 1 with all the debris loaded into 5 deuce-and-a-half trucks. That's 2.5-ton trucks for non-military personnel. The spacecraft was loaded on side-by-side lowboy trailers and the alien bodies were checked over at the 509th Army Base Hospital. Somewhere along the line, the name of these creatures got changed. They are no longer aliens, but EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities. The description of this particular species, the short grays, are as follows. Bigger than a child, but not a child. That's about 4 to 5 feet in height. With an oversized balloon-shaped head, and had human features but didn't look human at all. The eyes were large and dark and set apart from each other on a downward slope. The nose and mouth were especially thin, almost like slits. Ears were not much more than indentations, and the color were grayish-brown and completely hairless. Now let's get this convoy on the road. Everything was brought to Fort Bliss, which I believe was a sorting station because the debris was sorted and crated, which included the alien bodies. Some of the debris was flown directly to Wright Field, while everything else moved onward to Fort Riley. While at Fort Riley, all the crates, approximately 30 in number, were offloaded and stored in an old veterinary building. This is where Corso's adventure begins. We'll get back to him in a moment. The next day, all the crates got loaded again and were off to Wright Field as per the routing manifest inside one of the crates. In 1947, the Army and the Air Force were having a power struggle, so the EBE bodies were split up. Those EBEs that the Army wanted went to Walter Reed Army Hospital, the morgue pathology section, while the bodies that the Air Force wanted went to Bethesda Naval Hospital. When the Air Force became a separate military branch, all the EBEs ended up at Norton Air Force Base in California. Let me take you back to Fort Riley, July the 6th, 1947, where Major Corso was the duty officer that night. His duties were to answer the phones, be the human firewall between an emergency and a disaster, and to ensure that everyone is on duty. While walking his beat, Corso checks on his friend, Major Sergeant Bill Brown, aka Brownie, and finds that he is not at his post outside the veterinary building, which is classified as no access. Brownie calls out for Corso from inside the building. Brownie's face is, quote, dead pale, just as if he had seen a ghost, end quote, page 32. He informs Corso that the guys that unloaded the deuce-and-a-halves looked inside the top-secret boxes and saw, quote, nothing like anything they had seen before, nothing from this planet, end quote, page 33. Corso orders Brownie to go back to his post at the door outside the building and start searching the 30 crates. He finds a crate that is the strangest weapon crate ever, or the smallest crate for a coffin, and opens it. His stomach rolls up into his throat and he almost gets sick. To be perfectly accurate, let me read from the book. The contents, enclosed in a thick glass container, were submerged in a thick light blue liquid, almost as heavy as a gelling solution of diesel fuel, but the object was floating, actually suspended, and not sitting on the bottom with the fluid over the top, and it was soft and shiny as the underbelly of a fish. At first, I thought it was a dead child they were shipping somewhere, but this was no child. It was a 4-foot human-shaped figure, with arms, bizarre-looking 6-fingered hands, I didn't see a thumb, thin legs and feet, and oversized incandescent light bulb-shaped head that looked like it was floating over a balloon gondola for a chin. I know I
I must have cringed at first, but then I had the urge to pull off the top of the liquid container and touch the pale gray skin. But I couldn't tell whether it was skin because it also looked like a very thin, one-piece, head-to-toe fabric covering the creature's flesh. Its eyeballs must have rolled way back in the head because I couldn't see any pupils or iris or anything that resembled a human eye. But the eye sockets themselves were oversized and almond-shaped and pointed down to its tiny nose, which didn't really protrude from the skull. It was more like a tiny nose of a baby that never grew as the child grew, and it was mostly nostril. The creature's skull was overgrown to the point where all its facial features, such as they were arranged absolutely frontal, occupying a small circle on the lower part of the head. The protruding ears of a human were non-existent. Its cheeks had no definition, and there were no eyebrows or any indications of facial hair. The creature had only a tiny, flat slit for a mouth, and it was absolutely closed, resembling more like a crease or indentation between the nose and the bottom of a chinless skull than a fully functioning orifice.
Let's fast forward the time to 1961. Major Corso had been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and is working at the Pentagon's Army Research and Development Division, specifically the Foreign Technology Desk, and is reporting to Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau. Corso inherits what he calls the nut file, the Roswell files containing the 509th Army Airfield Retrieval Reports, medical and autopsy reports, and a cache of debris. General Trudeau orders Corso to integrate the items in his nut file into society. Corso describes how he accomplishes his mission. First, he compiles a list of technical human resources based on the debris. He feels that he will need to see rocket scientists from Germany working at Alamogordo, guidance specialists in the guided missile program, and theoretical scientists. Then, he matches up the human resources with the appropriate security clearances to the technologies. Corso consults Dr. Robert Sarbacher, physicist, Werner von Braun, aerospace engineer, Hans Köhler, Hermann Oberth, German rocket pioneer, and John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American mathematician, physicist, and engineer. Now, Corso takes inventory of the defense contracts and lines them up to the materials in his nut file to see where they will fit in. Corso wants the industry to figure out exactly what the military has. He puts on his civilian clothes so he doesn't draw the CIA's attention to himself in order to visit the defense contractors. Now, Corso is to farm out the nut file components to industry so the industry can take credit for the discovery and the development of those components. The only catch is that General Trudeau wants to have the military have first dibs at purchasing the completed products before they are sold to the general public. For example, we can play a game. I'll describe what the retrieval team found and how Corso introduced it to industry, and you guess what the end product was. Item 1 are tiny, clear, single filaments of flexible glass-like wires twisted together. The narrow filaments are thinner than copper wire. As the harness of wires were held up to the light, one could see an eerie glow coming through them, as if they were conducting the light and breaking them up into different colors. On the morning of the crash, Colonel Blanchard was told by the retrieval team that they couldn't find any conventional wiring in the spacecraft. They were mystified by the single glass filaments that ran through the panels of the ship. The fibers, in reality, were glass crystal tubes, which led to some type of junction box, where the filaments separated and went to different parts of the control panel that seemed to acknowledge electrically the different colors pulsating through the tube. A signal corps liaison informs General Trudeau and Corso about fiber optic experiments going on at Bell Labs. Colonel Corso meets with Hans Köhler at Bell Labs in early 1962. He was informed that using light as a carrier of all kinds of signals, light, sound, even digital information, through a single filament glass strand was holding great promise. Corso was amazed that the EBEs were able to defy one of our laws of physics, that light travels in a straight line. How could it bend? Was it some kind of illusion? Köhler explained, it only looks like an illusion, and under a microscope they saw that each strand that looked like one solid piece of material was actually double layered. Corso asked Köhler how the EBEs might have used this type of technology. Köhler explained that the fibers could be used in all ship's communication, visual imaging, telemetry, and in any amplification of the vehicle's signals sent, received from other crafts or from bases on the moon or on Earth. Köhler suggested that the Army could use the fibers for seeing where the missile is going from the missile's point of view, tracking enemy movements on the ground, carrying heavy data visual signals from surveillance satellites, and packing very complicated multi-channel communication systems into small spaces. So, Bell Labs got the fiber remnants from the crash. What was item 1? Fiber optics. Fiber optics signals the end of part 2, but stay tuned for part 3 because we have 4 more items that were found in the crash debris that were turned over to industry for development to help mankind. Thank you for watching. What's the grouse? I'm grousing about debunkers accepting government's explanations on what happened in Roswell without considering all the details. I had an opportunity to view other people's videos on the day after Roswell, but the debunkers fail to expose certain details found in Corso's book, but revealed in this video. For example, is the government trying to tell us that they sent the parachute dummies over to the 509th Army Base Hospital to get checked over by the doctors? I don't think so. And what about the 5 2.5-ton trucks, 2 flatbeds with medics and radiation sweepers just to pick up a weather balloon and a test dummy? I don't think that one's real either. And no one's considered to show and explain what Brownie, the other truck drivers, and Corso saw when they opened up the top secret crates? That would expose the truth. Selfie photos and videos of the EBEs were displayed in the video to help you visualize Corso's description on what he saw. A video could be made of each selfie and video displayed during Corso's description. I'd like to highlight Jackie Gleason and then President Nixon's selfie because they were golfing buddies and celebrities. Nixon knew about Jackie's interest in EBEs, so in February 1973 he picked up Gleason at his house and they drove to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. Although the picture is an artist's conception of what Gleason saw, he describes the 4 EBEs perfectly to Clark C. McClelland, author of the book Stargate Chronicles. Quote, "They appeared childlike in physical shape, small in appearance, except they were older-looking creatures, not youthful, as children appear, with large, hairless heads, slightly wrinkled faces, large sunken eyes, and a small mouth, with what apparently were 2 ears, which were just holes in their heads. They had a frail body with small hands and feet. They were about 3 to 4 feet tall. Now, I realize people don't go to crash sites or go to top secret Air Force bases with cameras, except maybe that naval officer behind the EBE body. Debunkers didn't mention that Corso was congratulated by 5 other Army colonels, and his boss General Trudeau for his accuracy of detail in his book. Hans Köhler of Bell Labs did acknowledge that Bell Labs were working on fiber optics, but wouldn't it be so much easier if you had a working sample to re-engineer? Now, how did Corso get the fiber optic sample in the first place, since Köhler was secretly working at it? Corso had to be telling the truth that his samples came from the nut file, which came from the Roswell crash. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notification of The Day After Roswell Part 3.
I know we ain't gonna take